All set?
Yeah, man.
By the way, I like your snazzy flannel shirt. I think this is the first time since we started the show that you have appeared on camera in anything but like a regular t-shirt.
You may not realize this, but I actually filled in for Eddie Vedder tonight
Oh, well, you nailed it.
with this
You nailed it.
flannel.
Let me hear your singing voice.
All right, that's all you get.
Oh, it's such a shame. That's probably going to get edited out.
I will not, because I've been taking your advice and I do zero editing anymore. Or are we done recording? Done. Upload.
Well, in that case, I want to take a minute to send out a welcome to everybody out there in podcast land. Whether you're on video or audio, it doesn't matter. We love you exactly the same, just like all parents say when they have more than one kid. We are back, of course, with another episode of Different Strings, a guitar adjacent podcast. I had to explain to my wife today why we call it a guitar adjacent podcast. And she thought that was funny. I'm your host, Wes, and I am here as always with my good friend, Andrew. Andrew, please say hello to the whole world.
Hello, world.
Fantastic. That
also
was
known as the first line of code everyone writes in Java.
Yeah, and we're got a little bit of a different approach this week because there's no opening act. We're going straight into a multi-headliner setup. But before we do that, as always, which is the second of 3 times I'm going to say it during this episode, Andrew, please tell everyone where they can find us out there on the internet.
You can find us at differentstringspodcast.com. You'll notice I took off the www and even the https : / because
that's a /
it is, thank you, it is 2023 and you don't need that anymore.
And I'm just glad that you don't say, and this was a big thing when I was coming up in the IT world, dub.
Oh, triple dub.
Oh man, that was like that squicked me at the same level as people that call them tats.
Wait, Wes, there's do we have an intruder in the podcast this evening?
It does appear to be so. And I was kind of ignoring it until you brought it up, which is easy to do for anybody listening to the audio version. They wouldn't even have known. We could have not told them ever, and they never would have known. So, Andrew, please introduce our guest for us.
Yeah, so we have with us this evening, this is, by the way, a Different Strings podcast first. We actually have a guest.
Yeah.
So our guest this evening is an accomplished musician, songwriter, incredible guitar player, does great work behind the board, big fan of his music, and he has one other distinction in that he is also my son. So everyone, I would like you to say hello to Marshall, and Marshall, you say hello to our 7 listeners.
Hello, all 7 listeners. It is lovely to meet you.
Thank you for joining us this evening, my friend. So some of you may be wondering why a guest and why would he deign himself and us important enough to visit us? So Wes, why don't you kind of talk a little bit about why we even have a guest this evening?
Well, there's a couple things, right? So we have obviously talked about Marshall many times on this show, because I find it a little mind-boggling that you create the quality of music that you do with no amps. And that just really boggles my mind. So I've been wanting to talk to you about that process, because I know that Andrew, you also do some in the box work that doesn't require amps or even amp modelers for that matter, which is something I can wrap my head around. But the main reason the reason that I pitched having you on is because I read an article a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. It was an interview with a guy called Steve Lukather. Marshall, have you heard of Steve Lukather?
I have heard of Steve Lukather.
Okay. Do you know what band
that I've heard of him?
Okay. Do you know what band he's in?
Or was in or isn't?
Is he still in a band?
Mhm.
I don't know, to tell you the truth, but
Yeah.
he has long been associated with one specific band.
I do not know what band that is.
Okay. Next question.
Mhm.
So, and then it seemed like rapid fire after that. There was an article with an interview with a guy called Uli Roth, who I'm gonna just go out on a limb here and bet you've never heard of Uli Roth.
You would be correct. I have
Okay.
not.
Maybe Wes, maybe it's because you left out his middle name.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Unless he's called Uli John Roth, nobody knows who he is.
Right,
You know what?
Still don't.
No,
And
absolutely
then
no idea.
And then there was a third interview with
Mhm.
another guy called Steve Stevens. Now, do you know who he is?
I've heard the name in passing, but I don't know who he really is.
All right,
Okay.
so check this out. I feel like this is almost critical to do. You know these guitar players, but don't know the acts they are associated with. Steve Stevens associated with Billy
Billy
Idol,
Idol.
and you know Billy Idol's music.
Amazingly, I know who Billy Idol is. Never listened to a single song.
That you know of.
Actually, that's what was his biggest hit?
Well, I mean, White Wedding, Rebel Yell are the two that like most people know him from.
Yeah.
Eyes Without a Face,
Dancing with Myself.
That's the one. Dancing with
His-
Myself. That's the
his-
one song of his I know.
which
Yeah.
is yeah.
His cover of Moni Moni was pretty good.
Yep. Steve Lukather is associated with Toto and has been for decades now.
Oh, okay, yeah. I like Toto.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Uli John Roth was one of the original guitar players from the Scorpions, who you know from the meme "Rock You Like a Hurricane."
Right. Which, I mean, if that doesn't scream musical prowess, I don't know what does.
Exactly. And relevance in 2023, exactly.
Right.
So, Wes, what did all these youngsters have to say?
Well, and
Right.
I actually looked this up, right? So Uli Roth was born in 1954. Steve Lukather, 1957. Steve Stevens, 1959. So he's the youngest. He is 64 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think if Uli Roth was an American, he'd be a boomer. I think he'd be right at the tail end of the boomers. But he's not American, he's German. So he was born in divided Europe, divided Germany at the very beginning phases of the Cold War, 3 years before Sputnik. I mean, he grew up in a hard place. But Lukather and Stevens absolutely did not. These dudes grew up in whatever the generation is before Gen X. I don't know what that is. It can't go straight from the boomers to X.
They call it lost generation or something. I don't know. Like
maybe that. And Steve Lukather is one of the hands down most renowned studio guitarists I think ever in the history of studio guitars. He's played on over 1,500 albums in his lifetime.
About a thing or two.
Yeah, I mean, he was the guitar player for Michael Jackson in the studio for his album Thriller.
Yeah.
Right. He did. If you listen to Beat It, he played all the guitars except for the guitar solo that Eddie Van Halen came in and played. He is as towering a guitar player as there exists in the United States. And in his interview, he basically shit all over every guitar player under 25 years old because they don't live and die by tube amps. They don't play with feeling. They can't read music. They don't know tone. And it was a prime example of something that you and I talked about on one of our very early episodes. And it's not even a buzzword anymore. It's so pervasive in our society, and it is gatekeeping. And both Roth and Stevens jumped right on that bandwagon, trashing younger musicians for their basically what I perceive as not doing things the way they did, which is the epitome of gatekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And that just made me angry because at least with Steve Stevens, he's somebody that I listen to on a regular basis. I admire Lukather for what he's done in the industry and what he does as a musician. I'm not really a big fan of Uli Roth. I didn't like anything he did ever with the Scorpions or his other bands. So, but that whole gatekeeping thing really kind of snapped me. And so I wanted to talk to somebody who is the target of that kind of sentiment. Because, I mean, obviously, what Steve Lukather says on any given day isn't really affecting you.
No, not necessarily.
But I am really curious to see, in your experience as a musician,
Mhm.
if you have come across that kind of attitude from anybody of any age in any kind of context. And number one, what happened, basically. And then number two, did you recognize it? Number three, how did you deal with it? Number four, does it continue to affect you, or were you able to brush it off and move on? Because clearly I have not been able to brush it off and move on, because this still pisses me off a month after I first read the article.
And by the way, I feel the same way. I ranted about this on an episode, how upset I was about what Stevens said. Specifically, he was talking about an album that he was recording, and he mentioned that he was going back in the studio with tube amps and microphones because he didn't want to sound, quote, like shit people record at home. And I'm sorry, but I've heard recordings at home that rival, if not improve upon, guitar tones I've heard recorded at a lot. I mean, I can go on and on and on. But so, Marshall, your thoughts and your responses to Wes's questions and just in general about gatekeeping and your experience with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I wasn't privy to this information before this was brought up, but I have experienced numerous times events of gatekeeping. It's honestly not something that's like necessarily something that comes up more. Is just that's the baseline for guitarists in my age range, is you're going to be disliked by the older generation because of what gear you use and how you play. um my response to these three clearly well renowned guitar players is, I mean, I didn't even know who you guys were. I don't necessarily think that's that your input is necessarily important to what I'm doing. So, when it's people that I don't really know, you just have to brush it off, and just move on with whatever makes you happy, man. Um, because there's plenty of reasons to not have tube amps and stuff like that, but we won't get into that yet. Um, but I remember posting my first couple songs on, SoundCloud because it's free, and posting little snippets of it to Instagram reels and stuff like that, and showing off like, here's, this amp modeler I'm using, here's, this 7 string and drop A tuning that, just really pisses off Gen X and baby boomers when they see, anything with more than 6 strings that's not in standard tuning. They're like, what the hell is this? Um, but
Yes.
I know. So it's I mean, I play all sorts of stuff. One of the things I play is prog metal, and that's something that a lot of people aren't into. I play on modelers, and if anybody is the target audience for comments like that, it's 100% me. I mean, I couldn't fit more into the box that they're creating. It couldn't be more me.
But
Um,
one of the things that when Wes and I were talking about this, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, is when we're talking about tube amps, Wes and I have a basis. We have context, right? Because we
yeah,
grew up. My first amp wasn't a tube amp, but my first good one was, and there were
Yeah.
many years where that's all I had. And
Ditto.
then because of technology and because of living in situations where we can't play loud, we accommodated. We've got,
yeah,
line 6, we got a pod. And then as technology got better, we got Kempers, or we got Axe
Yeah.
effects, and then as technology really got better and computers got faster, we got plugins like Neural. And some people I know that play tube amps have completely ditched them for digital. Don't miss it. But we have that context. Like, we knew what the world was when there was tube amps everywhere. But
Yes.
someone like yourself who grew up, and I can probably say this without, you grew up in a world where tube amps just didn't exist. We never had one in the house. We never got to play one. We certainly never got to play one loud. And yet
No.
you managed to learn to play guitar and record with what you had.
Yeah.
Someone telling you you're not doing it right because you don't have a tube amp. What does that sound? How does that even register with
And
someone who doesn't
and
have
you
that
know,
context?
it comes off a little tone deaf because let's not forget some amazing tones came out of the pod when that came out.
Yeah.
I mean, do we really need to get into that? Some legendary albums have been made with the pod. I mean,
The
let's
first
just be
Periphery
honest.
record was all done with a pod. When I heard that for the first time, I could not believe he used a pod HD for that.
I
Dude,
didn't
it
know
was
that either.
incredible.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was so incredible.
Well,
Now, to
and
listen
even
to it now, you'd say that sounds a little dated, but we're going back when that's all there was the pod
Yeah,
HD, and that's what he used, and it was groundbreaking. It started a genre.
of course. I mean, you go back far enough, any amplifier is going to sound dated. You know, that's not even really necessarily an argument I don't think anybody could make, you know, logically. But like, what's important is that, like, that album came out, he used a pod, and hey, guess what? Everybody loved it. I mean, that album blew up, and no one was like, no one was like, well, you know, the album would have been great if only he used a tube amp. You know, there was
yeah,
no, if only
Right.
he had used a tube amp.
Right.
You know what else on that album? Fully, you know, I mean, he was MIDI drumming. I mean, fully tapping in his drums. You
Yep.
know, clicking them in, playing them on an E-kit sometimes. That album is about as computer as you can make it, and it's a great album. Um, so, I mean, it's all personal preference. I mean, I don't have the experience. I mean, if you ask me, point to the tubes on this tube amp, I'd be like, I, out of my realm. I don't know what that means. I don't know where. Are they in the front? Are they in the back? Is it under there? I don't know. But all I
all
know
right.
is that
Clearly,
the
that's
stuff
a
I use
failure
sounds
in
good.
parenting, and I'm just got to lay that down right there.
Well, I mean, one of many, but we won't get into that. But
Well, but then you also never get the joy of bringing an amp to a show and turning it on and having 3 fires start in the back and
right,
go, oh, great, do I have backups? And so, I mean,
it doesn't get much more metal than that, right? So, I mean, my first experience with any sound coming out of an electric guitar was through, I believe it was through a little plug-in amplifier. I don't know if you remember this. My first quote unquote amplifier was a little mini one. It was about this big.
and plugged right
It
into
had
the
a
guitar.
1/4 inch jack. Plug that in. I put headphones into it. That was my first amp. So immediately, I have no basis for being like, you know, a traditionalist. That's like the least traditional way you could start. But I
Yeah.
went from that immediately um, to amp sims. I didn't have my first amp until it was gifted to me by my grandfather about 2 years after I started playing. So for the
Well,
first like
do you
long
remember
time
what that
ago,
amp was?
yeah, that was a
was a-
Marshall
Mhm.
code
Yep.
code what?
50.
What was it? Code 50.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that was a
And
joint.
even that was not a tube amp.
No, it
No,
was a
That was
solid
an
joint.
state.
electronic.
Digital. It was a joint collaboration between Softtube and Korg. Korg, who owns Marshall, and they put out basically a very inexpensive digital amplifier that
Yeah.
I think it sounded really good. It was
Sounded
capable
really
of
cool.
good tones, but I at the time that you got that, you were already getting really good tones out of the Native Instruments guitar rig. And
Yeah.
then shortly after that, we all discovered Neural DSP, and you've never
Yes.
looked back.
And Neural DSP, once I got into that, yeah, I never looked back, man. They just sound so incredible. Um, my my workflow is like built around using neural plugins.
So, so I
So
kind of
yeah,
want to go back to gatekeeping a little bit because
yeah,
it's
We
funny
sidetracked
how,
ourselves.
yeah,
That
well,
was
we started
the
talking gear.
somebody from the other headlining band coming in for a cameo on a song.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
supposed to go. So why, I'm curious to know, well, maybe that's conversation for my therapist, but I wonder, why is the target audience for these comments like, you do you, but the people whose generation made these comments, we're the ones getting our bloods boiling. We're the ones who are
Yeah.
pissed off because we're all we can think of is, well, Wes and I like to be ambassadors for guitar. Like, I like to think that we are doing our little bit to maybe remove these barriers, and gatekeeping is a barrier. To me, it's like a form of bullying.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
it's a pet peeve of mine when I see it everywhere. And Wes, you can
Yeah.
attest to, gatekeeping is not, restricted to music, right? It's motorcycles.
No,
It's
it's not. Yeah, it's
any
not
hobby
restricted
has
to music,
gatekeepers, right?
Yeah,
and it's not
any
restricted
topic.
to generations either.
No,
No.
absolutely
You
not.
know, I related a story to in an early episode where even I don't want to say even I experienced gatekeeping, like it would never happen to me or something like that. But I didn't even recognize what it was until I sat back and thought about it. And there was I was participating in a forum discussion um surrounding the surf music that I love so much. And one guy came in and he was just like, none of you all are talking, you're not talking about surf rock. It's not.
Yeah.
First of all, if you're calling it surf rock, you're already outside
Yeah.
the genre. You can only call it surf music. You can only play it with this kind of instrument. You can only play it with a Fender. You must use a Fender amp. The bass player has to have a P bass. The drummer can't have more than 2 toms total.
Yep.
And he just was dropping this
Yeah.
shitstorm on us. And I was like, dude, you don't fucking know me from a hole in the wall. Who are you to tell me how I'm supposed to talk about the music that I love?
Right, like it's now you can't even enjoy the genre, though. You can't even enjoy music
Yeah.
your way. Like, it's got
We
it was-
could get
it was-
around that.
so deep into this.
It was weeks before I could get that guy's words out of my head.
Yeah.
Anytime I put on a band that wasn't pure traditional surf
Yeah.
guitar instrumental music,
I could get so deep into that, because and I'm not, I don't really do forums necessarily, but I'm
I
in
don't blame you.
communities. I'm in communities on like Instagram and YouTube and the social medias and stuff. And I subscribe. My roots are in metal music. That was like the first stuff I wanted to play. That's what got me into making music. And so I'm into a lot of that sort of metal community. And there's a lot of different metal genres. I mean, subgenres are being created all the time, but
Yeah.
I do see gatekeeping for that exact thing where it's like, this isn't real metal. This isn't real metal. This is like some offshoot of metal where it's like not pure. And I'm like, dude, it's just all music. I think the concept, I'm a little bit of an extremist when it comes to pure freedom, pure musical freedom. And I think genres in and of themselves, as soon as you establish that one thing is one thing, you've created a division now where you either subscribe to it or you're not one of us. And I think that's really dangerous. It gets culty sometimes, even with people, I just
Even
think
when you're
it's
trying to
really
promote,
sucky.
like when Metallica had to get involved. Now, not my favorite band right now, but when Stranger Things came out last season and they played one of their songs in an episode,
Yeah.
and that was, to me, I'm like, great, like they're establishing what we were listening to back when the show took place, and
Yeah.
they got a whole bunch of new fans from this. And I'm like, that's amazing that Metallica, who's been around since, the aughts, now has new fans. And the gatekeepers started coming out on Twitter like, well, you're not a real fan because you haven't been listening since 83 and 81.
Yeah.
And then people were actually posted like, sorry, Metallica, that you have all these new fans that aren't real fans. And Metallica was like, a fan's a fan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a fan is a fan. They bought the merch. Leave them alone. It's fine.
Why
You
does
know,
it matter
so
what they started listening to them in 85 or 2005 or 2023? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah.
it's I have this emotional connection to this band because I've been listening to them for decades. They hold a special place in my heart. And screw you if you want to like alienate that and make it for everybody.
It's almost
Because I
like we
feel like
own
some people
them.
think that.
Yeah, it's almost like we take ownership of them. Like they're not
Mhm.
public anymore. We own them and they're not
Yeah.
allowed to do what we don't like them to do. I'm even guilty of that
Mhm.
too. You know, Dream Theater hasn't released a good album in 23 years, I say. Well, but that's my opinion. And I know that, but I'm really disappointed by that because I used to hold them close to the heart. They
Mhm.
felt like they belonged to me, and I felt betrayed when they started making bad records. So I kind of check myself from now and again, but I would never tell someone who just discovers Dream Theater that they can't listen to them because they weren't there in 93 when Images.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I
such a
think
toxic mindset.
my favorite example of that, and it's probably been around and around and around, is somebody who's wearing an Iron Maiden shirt or a Metallica shirt,
Mhm.
and somebody, usually it's
Name
a
3
young,
songs.
yeah, usually it's a young woman, right? And
Yeah.
somebody accosts them and says, hey, if you can't name 3 songs, then you're not a real fan.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, when I had my first Metallica shirt, I couldn't name 3 songs.
No.
I went and saw Metallica before I could name 3 songs. I enjoyed
Yeah.
the show. I bought a shirt. If somebody had jumped me the next day and said name 3 songs, I'd have been like,
Right. Came out of the bushes at you, held a knife to you,
yeah.
said name
But
3 songs, poser.
I have the advantage of, number 1 being a male, number
Yeah.
2 being a white male, number 3
Yeah.
being a fairly large, even back then, and somewhat intimidating looking, just from my size. So not that many people mess with me in the first place, just in general, walking down the street, so I realize I have a set of advantages that other people don't have, but
Yeah.
it would never occur to me to accost somebody like that. I'd be like, hey, cool Iron Maiden shirt.
Yes.
What's your favorite album? And if they go,
Yes.
well, I don't really know that much about them, I'm like, oh, you got to listen to Power Slave because that's their best album. I think that's their best album.
Yes.
You would be
You know,
wrong, but you could say that.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I think
love
that's
that.
how I would react because I've done that before.
Yeah.
I love that when people do that, man. It's because I was getting into the music scene and I didn't know that many bands. I was getting into like, I listened to Periphery, and then once I started doing that, there's like, Spotify recommended of like, here's all these bands that you don't know. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to listen to all these. And I would get into the communities forum, and then I would be like, hey, kind of new here. This is a really cool song. And they'd be like, what are you doing here? Get out. like
Yeah.
I intruded on their like special listening time, and I'm like, I just like listening to the band, man. Like but I love doing that for other people too. When like I see someone walking down the street, if they have like a Periphery shirt, Slipknot shirt, whatever band, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to talk to this person. I have to like, someone in common. Let me not like be like, hey, you stay over there. You listen to your, Miley Cyrus and Taylor Swift. Let me listen to the cool bands, That's such like toxic behavior,
Yeah.
because everybody wants their favorite band to be an underground band. That's the thing. Nobody wants their bands to quote unquote sell out, as they put it. And to these people, selling out is having more than 10 fans and playing not in a basement. So,
have you heard it? You've heard of Green Day, right, Marshall?
yes, I have.
Okay. So
that was the first songs I ever learned on guitar, actually.
awesome. They're great songs to learn on because
Yeah.
I don't want to say they're simple because their genre is less technically complex than a lot of other
Sure.
genres,
Of
but
course.
they are harmonically rich songs. They
Very.
just happen to use relatively basic chord structures.
Hell of a lot of power chords.
Yeah. So they put out, I think, two or three albums before they hit it with Dookie.
Yes.
And the gatekeeping in among their own fans was so strong that they were banned from playing at the club that they got huge playing at.
Yeah.
because they signed a major label record deal. They got a real producer that polished their sound and made them sound fantastic. Mm-hmm. And they had videos, and they went on big tours. They played at Woodstock, and their early fans shunned them
because they sold out.
They quote unquote sold out.
Yeah. I'd have sold out in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Anybody who gripes at a band for selling out has never had to live with 7 other people in a house and eat ramen and mac and cheese.
Yeah.
The powder mac and cheese, not the good sauce kind.
The powder.
Over and over and over, and peanut butter and stale bread, and worry about paying the rent. And, you know, if you gripe on a band for selling out, you don't truly understand what it means to be in a band.
Yeah.
Or the purpose. Did they think that Green Day's purpose was to be broke the rest of their life? No, their plan, their goal, their aspiration was to be famous. I would argue maybe it wasn't, but that's certainly what happened. But no one's doing this because they want to be poor the rest of their life.
Yeah.
So basically, getting famous and making it your day job isn't selling out; it's making it your day job.
And if nothing else, their first, I mean, all of their albums really, but especially those first 3 were all talking to people. They weren't about internal struggles necessarily. They were all like protest music, you know, like political music. And of course that's going to reach people. Of course that's the goal. What did they think? They only made music for themselves? If they did that, why would they put it out? You know what I'm saying? And I feel like to a lot of these gatekeepers, it's like I will want to touch on this because Dad, you said something interesting, is the concept of ownership with a band. There's a really amazing band, they're a metalcore band called Architects, and they just put out a song called Seeing Red, which is a response to all of their quote unquote fans, their diehard fans, that they started off as a really heavy band. They got more radio friendly because one of their guitar players unfortunately passed away. It was very sad. That guitar player had a lot of heavy influence, a lot of really metal stuff. So they got more radio friendly, and everybody hated them. They were sending death threats to their favorite band.
Nice.
You know, they couldn't do interviews without people literally accosting them on their way to and from. They couldn't play shows without people actually throwing things at them, at their favorite band. These people would be wearing Architect shirts with like the logo from like the first album and throw things at them as like a protest of being like, be heavy again, be heavy again. They just released a song called Seeing Red, and it was a response to that. It's heavy as hell. And it's full of lyrics being like, are you happy now? Thanks for the death threats. We only love you when you're seeing red. You know, we only love you when you're making heavy music. Other than that, we hate you. And there's that concept, and it's just, who are these zombie brain people who are subscribing to this just toxic mindset, who just can't think for themselves? If you don't like the album, don't listen to it. There are a myriad of heavy bands out there that have 7 Spotify listeners because they're so heavy that nobody wants to listen to them. Go listen to them. Please go listen to them. I'm sure they would love it.
Right.
Yeah. Move to Norway and invest.
Move to Sweden, find in the phone book a black metal band and go listen to them.
That is unsettling.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I never knew that.
Slipknot's doing it right now. All the Slipknot fans, me being one, Slipknot fans need to chill. Like seriously, y'all need to chill, dude, because it's too much.
It's
chill,
all gonna be okay.
It's all gonna be okay. And they're like, I'm a maggot forever, man. And I'm like, you're in need of a shower, is what you are. So, I mean, because Slipknot put out a record, I'm gonna be totally honest, I didn't love it. It was their last one, called The End So Far.
Yeah.
Please go listen to it. It's a good album. I didn't love it. Not heavy. I'm just gonna tell you, not heavy. Doesn't sound like Slipknot. People hate it, and they're, again, death threats, throwing stuff on stage, all sorts of stuff, man. I'm like, this is a band who you've loved for more than 2 decades.
Right.
You've loved. I'm a maggot forever, but don't put out an album unless it sounds like Iowa from 2002.
Right.
Magic
Don't
forever
evolve.
as long as you're doing
Don't
what I want you to
evolve.
do. Yeah.
Right. Don't
Yeah.
evolve. Don't grow old. Certainly don't put out music I don't personally like.
Yeah. And
So
we see a lot of the same thing, believe it or not, with sports teams. People
Yeah.
identify so tightly with the fortunes of the Eagles or
Yeah.
the Giants or the Rangers or the Astros or the 49ers or whatever.
sports
And
fans may be the worst.
I you know what? I'm
It's
not
on
even going to
par.
argue with you about that.
It's on par, I think, at least because I mean, when you see like actual deaths because of people rioting because of literally a sports match, you know you've gone too far.
Yeah.
What Wes? Yeah, I want you to finish, but as soon as you mentioned sports, I have to say it's got to. They might be the most fair weather friends of any hobby,
Yeah.
and you are tying your entire. Some people tie their entire existence,
Yeah.
what they do on Sundays, scheduling their personal lives around these games, and then
Yeah.
you're cheering for a color, man. I've never seen anything like it. That was one of the reasons I gave up on professional sports decades ago, because it's just more toxic than even music. But go,
And that
Wes, I want
reminds
you to
me of
kind of
two things. There's
yeah.
two things that reminds me of, and that's church every Sunday, and two, Bloods and Crips. It's literally Bloods and Crips, dude.
Yeah.
You're wearing green, you're wearing blue, and you know, when it comes to like Eagles versus I don't know who the heck wears blue, but whatever. So not a sports fan if you couldn't tell, but so it just seems so like why do you have nothing else going on in life that you need to actually get so violent and so enthralled in this one thing that you decide that for whatever reason you need to like ruin somebody else's day because of it. I mean, why? Like I mean, come out of your mom's basement, please. I mean, there's sunlight outside. It's okay, man.
Well, and like, so you've got those people that are, you know, struggling to get out of their mom's basement. And then you've got guys, and by the way, I looked it up. The three guys that we're talking about at the top of the show are classified as boomers. The boomer generation technically lasts until 1964.
Yeah.
I made sure I looked that up. So
it checks out then.
Yeah, it checks out. So, you know, so we've got the kids that won't get out of their mother's basement, but we've also got these people who have achieved success and are basically rolling shit downhill at everybody that hasn't.
It screams like I need relevancy so bad. Well, you know what I mean?
They're in a position where they can motivate and inspire, and instead they spend their time dogging younger players. Because why? What will that do? What does that do to Steve Lukather's cred at this point in his career?
Right.
Yeah.
What does
dogging? I'll tell you, who's the dude, the Tim dude on YouTube?
Tim Henson, right?
No, he's the guy in Don't tell me. You told me, didn't you?
I told you.
Okay. Not Tim Henson. Andrew, he's a session guy. He always appears in his little cockpit. Tim somebody. Is it Tim Pierce?
Oh, yeah, Tim Pierce.
Yeah.
Yeah. And think of how pleasant and encouraging that dude is, right? And if Lukather would spend just a little time in any studio going through and showing people his guitar parts from the hundreds of hit songs he played on, and showing people that one person can be so versatile on the instrument that they can do all of these different things, man, that dude he'd be huge. And I mean, he is already huge, but I mean, I would watch that.
He would have relevancy again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What an easy way to be relevant.
Yeah. And to me, also, just these critiques just scream that they need relevancy because no one has cared who they were for 30 years. You know what I mean?
It's presenting a problem without a solution. Yeah. What is Tim Pierce doing? Tim Pierce is putting himself out there on a regular basis to offer and educate and offer his opinion on songs and his take on how the guitar players might have been thinking or how they approached. And like, I think that's brilliant. And then what could Lukather do if he sees a problem that guitar players aren't learning to read and don't know theory? Well, do something about that.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah,
just complain
seriously.
and whine and bitch about it. I mean,
Yeah.
make a YouTube channel and show people why reading music is cool and why learning all of the theory that you know is how that helps you as an improvisationalist, and maybe put some stuff out there to like make the world better. I mean, I'm not saying I don't love Lukather's music, but from the time I read those comments and watched his interviews, I'm like, I don't know that I'll put on a Steve Lukather album the same again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm that I could get off on a whole tangent here about, you know, the perception of the artist and the consumption of their work, you know.
Oh yeah, that's a whole thing.
Because, you know,
Can we separate the art from the artist? That's a conversation we absolutely need to have at some point.
Yeah.
I agree. And
I think it's an important one.
Yeah. And I know that I struggle with it depending on the genre. Like if it's music that I don't particularly like, but I have a couple albums in that genre, and the dude who has the one album is a dick, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can live with not listening to that guy ever again.
Yeah.
But if Geddy Lee became an asshole overnight, would I stop listening to Rush?
Oh, dude, I was crushed. I was crushed when I found out Eric Clapton was a raging racist asshole.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was crushed.
Honestly, me too. And I don't even really listen to him all that much. But I just, because I know so many people do, and so many people have been inspired by him. Because, I mean, let's not mince words. I mean, he's a fantastic musician. I mean, one of the greatest guitarists in history. But damn, that racism really knocked him down a few points. It really sucks.
Doesn't look good on you.
It's not you had a good thing going. You had to open your mouth about politics, and it ruined it for you.
Well, I was going to ask a question earlier, and the question was, is it getting worse? But I don't think it is. I do think it's the availability of people's opinions and how they now can completely bypass their PR guys and their lawyers and just open up a web browser or their phone and go to Twitter and say some racist stuff. And now there's just no filter anymore. And so you're seeing everything and everyone for who they really are. And it's not always great. And so I think that's technology making the world a worse place. And I think that kind of lets me segue a little bit into the second topic I wanted to talk about, which is technology. So, Marshall, you and I...
That was very nicely done, Andrew.
Thank you.
I know, that segue, brilliant, 10 points.
Thank you. Gordon Ramsay did rate that 5 stars. I wanted to talk about technology with you specifically for a couple of reasons. Obviously, because as we mentioned before, you are someone who has grown up as a musician with what I would argue is some of the most incredible technology known to mankind, and
of course,
and the internet availability. So, you know, for people like Wes and I, for example, to record a song, one song, 30 years ago would have been time consuming and expensive, prohibitively expensive.
Yeah, the money is a big thing.
To the point where it probably didn't happen. Let alone recording an entire album without planning. And it would take days, weeks, or even in some cases, I've recorded an album over months. And then because we didn't have a whole lot of tracks at our disposal, 16 at the most, you were like cutting corners to try to get everything done. And there was no double tracking. And it was just, everything was just, it was as good as it was going to get.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks ago, you sent me a song you recorded in your room, completely digitally by yourself, programmed everything. And it sounded better than anything I had ever done, ever.
And to be fair, it did take some time. That took all of 3 weeks.
And all I can think of is how great technology is. However,
to just enable that to happen.
There's got to be downsides. And what I want to talk about today is, as someone who's grown up with only knowing that technology, how do you perceive it? And what are the positives, but also the drawbacks to having this, as Wes and I called it, the democratization of home recording, where now anyone can do it, no matter their budget, and frankly, no matter their talent level. Well, let's not even get into that yet. What are the positives and drawbacks of this technology, and as you see it, how is it
I'm going
affecting you?
I'm going to demonstrate the first upside to this stuff that I use, which is all electronic. Wes, it looks like you have some amps behind you.
I do. Two amps and two
any
cabinets.
Take any amp, just an amp.
Okay.
And I want you to, if you don't mind, just tell me how much one of them was.
So right behind me, the one on the top is a Koch twin tone.
Excuse you. This is a family-friendly show.
Demonetized.
KOCH, it's a Dutch word. It's pronounced Koch. It's a twin tone too. It's a 50
Frankly,
watt
Wes, I love your Koch.
EL34 head. And I bought it used in 2006-ish. And it cost me $850 used.
$850 used. Yeah. Okay. So for $850, you got one amp, right?
One amp.
The stuff I use, the company called Neural DSP makes amp sims. Not sponsored, but please sponsor us. They
nicely done. Good job.
Some of the greatest sounding amps I've had. About $150 for one of these plugins. You get 3 amps, the head, as well as normally 3 cabinets, an EQ section, a delay and reverb, and then your pre-effects, whether that be a phaser, overdrive, chorus, that sort of stuff. $150 for 3 amps, 3 cabinets, amps, and an EQ.
Yeah.
That's the first upside. I mean, that's insane when you really think about it. So I might collectively, in terms of software that I bought, I might have collectively spent less than you have on that amp.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So, and that's, maybe just the amps, but, that's the first upside. I mean, it's pretty clear. I think most people at this point understand how much cheaper it is to go with, virtual amp sims.
Yeah. I got another instant upside. Let me ask you this. How much does your computer weigh?
I'm going to take a wild guess, say less than all of those amps, dragging them to, I mean, what, like 4 pounds?
Yeah. Is a laptop?
No, it's an iMac.
I have a Mac.
Oh, you have a Mac, like an iMac. Yeah. So maybe 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're not gonna throw your back out just lifting one of those from one place to another.
And hey, you know what? I don't have to lift it anywhere.
Yeah.
It stays right here. I can take my stems, put it on an iPad, and take that with me if I wanted to play live. Okay. If I want to do that, real heavy lifting here. Got my whole life in this one square.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got one amp that weighs 54 pounds.
Bless your heart.
Yeah.
It's too hard.
I used it at a gig in June. I humped that thing right to a gig.
But we're talking, that's more of the live setting, which, I mean, there are less expensive options. If you wanted to, for live settings, if you wanted to not use a tube amp, and Wes, we did a whole show on this. If you want to use a digital or solid state solution, which by the way, these days are sounding way better than they used to.
Yeah.
You can spend still less than that $850, way less, and have something that's pretty close to loud, and possibly run it direct if you want to, if you have the option. You're still going to make out okay. But I'm talking about like the studio stuff.
Right. Of course you
Yeah,
are.
because if Wes wants to record his amp,
Right.
he has to take it to a room,
Mhm.
drop a mic in front of it, position that mic, walk
Right.
back and forth between the board and adjust the mic so it's just so, and the room sound is going to be there, and he's going to have to
Mhm.
adjust the amp, and then he's going to have to record.
Yep.
Or you can plug into the UA Apollo and open a plugin and move the microphone with your
Yeah.
mouse. And
Yeah, you can move your microphones and you have different microphones. The versatility in one plugin that you could get with any like amp sim is insane. You can move your mics around. You have different mics. You have different cabs, different amps, different reverb settings, different. I mean, the versatility that you get is another up. But I'll tell you, for all of that to record an actual like tube amp is so complicated. And I'll tell you what I do. I press the space bar. I type in my password, I plug in my guitar, I open Logic, and I press R, and now I'm recording.
Yeah.
And that's it. And when I'm done, I press my spacebar. There's your take.
Yeah.
Done.
well, but according to Steve Lukather and Steve Stevens, you sound like garbage. So
Well, you know what, Steve Stevens?
Wes, I sent you now. Look, I admit I am this man's father. I might be looking at listening to his music through a filter.
Yeah.
I sent you some of his music. Garbage.
From a tone standpoint, absolutely not garbage. From a playing standpoint, far beyond what I was imagining he would sound like it at his tender young age.
Yeah.
Well, thank
But
you.
you know, I want, here's what I want to ask you a question. So tell me what your signal path is. Like, I want to know what gear you're using. So I know you guys have both mentioned neural
DSP. Yeah.
neural DSP, but it starts with the guitar. What are you using for a guitar?
For guitar, can I? It's right
Yeah.
here. I can.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Let's see.
I got a couple. And this is my main guitar that I use for most of the metal stuff. This is a Jackson HT6 Misha Mansour signature from a couple years ago. This thing is a workhorse. It's incredible. It's never failed me.
Is it a hardtail?
This is a hardtail. Yeah, it's got
Okay.
a hip shot bridge on there.
Nice.
5-way selector.
Bone stock, by the way, Wes, out of the gate.
Oh yeah,
had
stock.
bare knuckle pickups out of the gate.
Sweet.
Stainless steel frets. I got that from Sweetwater years ago. And yeah.
The second one, which Wes, I'm sure you will appreciate being a surf rocker, is this Fender Jazz, or actually not Fender, Squier Jazzmaster.
Yeah.
So all the Fender fanboys out there hate me for this. They hate me for this. Squier, it sounds awesome. It sounds amazing, this thing.
And it's got real Jazzmaster pickups in it too. It's not like one of the ones, one of the abominations where they put humbuckers in it.
Yeah. And it's not like P90s that look like the Jazzes. It's actual Jazzmaster pickups. Got your rhythm circuit and everything. Like it's got like weathered hardware on it. Like this bridge, I don't know if you can really tell, but it's like a little scratched up looking.
Yeah, it's kind of matte looking.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. And third and finally, this is my baby guitar. This is my favorite. This is a Gretsch.
Yeah.
Electromatic jet baritone. This thing is 29 and a half, 29 and 3/4, something like that. It's a giant slab of wood. I mean, this thing is huge. It sounds on clean tones like a piano. It's so resonant. It's amazing. This thing is a shoegaze machine, by the way. I'm recording a shoegaze EP right now. It's all this guitar because it's got these vintage sounding pickups in it, and it just has that like I think they're mini hums, but they got like not quite single coil, not quite humbucker.
Yeah, they look like mini hums.
Yeah, this thing is fantastic.
I'm super pissed at myself for not getting one of those and instead getting a different baritone, because
Which one did you get?
Well, I don't know if I want to talk about it. I'm embarrassed.
I told you that story about Wes's nightmare baritone that was not pleasant.
Yeah, no, it's an Eastwood. It's a model called a side jack.
I know exactly what that is.
Yeah. And
When I was looking for this, I was all over the baritone like subreddits and Instagram. Like I was in the baritone community, and I was between this and there was a Dan Electro baritone and that one.
yeah,
And I looked at that one, and people were saying that it was having like QC issues and stuff like that. But
they were
like,
right.
yeah, yeah. But I'm so happy with this, and this did not break the bank, by the way. This was, I think, like 500, 600, something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's about what the side jack was. And the main reason I went with the side jack is
mhm,
because it has a wiggle stick on it. It's got the tremolo system on it. And you know what I did? It was so poorly made. I got a
yeah.
conversion plate that hardtails it. So I'd have been better off getting the Gretsch in the
Yeah,
first place.
this thing is so amazing. It's kind of insane the quality that Gretsch puts out pretty consistently. I've tried several Gretches in like their low price points. You know, they're like entry model guitars. I've never picked up a Gretsch and been like, wow, this thing is ass. Like it's
Yeah.
never happened because I picked up really expensive Ibanez's and they feel fantastic. I picked up, you know, a $200 one. I'm like, this is not really the same company even feeling,
So
you know?
those are the guitars that you're usually
Yeah.
running into the computer, and then
Yes.
from a interface perspective. So
Mhm.
Wes, right now we're both, him and I,
Yeah.
Marshall and I, are using Universal Audio Apollos,
Yeah. Um,
which are
so it's
Are
not.
running direct.
are you using a cable that your dad made?
I'm not using one that my dad made, um, because I'm
He-
not coping that hard. But um, but you
It's gonna be a
know,
long night, Wes. It's gonna be a
yeah,
long night.
no, yeah, we do this all the time. But it's going straight into the Apollo, and the Apollo's going into the computer, and that's it in terms of hardware. By the
So
way,
Wes, I
I have
know.
no
yeah,
pedals,
that's all the
no
hardware, right?
Yeah. So
pedals.
Wes,
That's
I
No
it.
know that you're a
pedals.
bit of a Luddite. So Wes, the Universal Audio are Thunderbolt interfaces. If you're not
Mhm.
familiar, Thunderbolt came out about 50 years after the interface that you use,
Yeah.
the Digi-01.
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
the Digi-O. So the Apollos are, we're not using the Apollos for really anything other than the high impedance input.
yeah.
So they
Okay.
really could be almost anything that will
Yeah.
get signal into your computer. To be fair,
Any interface will pretty much do, to be
I've
honest. You could spend a couple hundred less than what we did on this and be totally
I
fine.
used a laptop at a practice with a neural plug-in and a very inexpensive interface. I mean, like a
Mhm.
$50 interface, and
Mhm.
it sounded really good. But for home, we wanted something with better
Yeah,
converters because
sure.
we're mixing and stuff. So,
Yeah, yeah.
Sure,
but that
yeah.
goes right into the computer. And then as far as signal chain goes,
That's
um,
all within Logic. My signal
right.
chain is entirely within Logic. So it depends on the genre I'm working in because it's tough. So, I mean, give me an example of a genre because I do a lot of different ones.
Do you gent?
I do gent. I do gent. I love, oh, we, oh, don't get me started. I love gent so much. I'm such a little gent kid, and like real metalheads hate me so much because they're like, you bought the whole guitar, use more than one string and one fret. And I'm like, nope, zeros all day. Nope, sounds sick. I'm gonna keep doing it. Cry more about it. I don't care. I do so for
Yeah.
a gent sort of track, I just open Logic. I got just a straight DI, right? The first thing I'll put on uh is a neural plugin straight into it. Got it starts got my prefix. I'll usually have an overdrive with the drive turned all the way down and
Oh,
the
wait.
level all the way up.
Now, don't bury the lead though, because
Yeah,
one of your favorite plugins just happens to be an archetype that Neural created for the guitar players in Gojira.
yeah.
And Wes, you're a Gojira fan.
I'm a
Oh yeah,
huge Gojira fan.
dude, it's amazing. That
It's
like that sound where they're doing like the tapping stuff and it's like octaved. It's
Yeah.
right in there. It's a preset.
I had no idea. That's so
Yeah, it
awesome.
sounds dope. That's
it
what I
is
use a lot of time for the gent stuff.
one of my favorite plugins is that not to play always, but to hear the tones that he gets with that plugin.
It's
It's
amazing.
it's unbelievable. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know if you knew, Marshall, that Wes was a big Gojira fan, but that
Yeah,
plugin,
I love Gojira, man.
yeah. So that's
So
your
straight into
base
that.
tone.
Yeah, so it's got the pre-effects, usually in overdrive. Then you got your amp, tweak your amp settings. You got your cab, tweak your cab settings. Then you got a built-in EQ, tweak that very slightly. I mean, you're doing like between -1 and +1 dBs for each little move. Sometimes even as small as like a 0.5 dB. But like after that, you get your post effects. For Gen, I don't usually have like a reverb or delay, so I usually turn that off. Then that goes straight into a Pro Q3 Fab filter. It's an EQ, so I just do a little bit more of a heavy EQ there to tame the subs and the really scratchy like 4K, sort of area. And then for that track, that's all I do. But usually I bus my like electric guitars, and on the bus there's usually a compression slash saturator, depending,
Sure.
and maybe a little bit of stereo widening, and that's it. And then all that goes into my mix bus.
Gotcha.
So you got like 3 layers of different things happening, which is why I don't process the guitar very much at all.
Yeah,
I
that makes sense.
under-process the guitar heavily because I have like 20 other plugins processing it, so you really don't need a super edited, gated, sort of guitar sound.
Yeah, that's kind of the equivalent in my practice of turning down the gain
Yep.
on the amp, because I know I'm going to layer guitars on top of it, so they don't all have to be,
Yeah.
gain on 10, gain on 10.
Yep.
I can build the feeling without oversaturating the sound. And it sounds like you're doing a similar thing, but
Yeah,
you're doing it in the computer.
my gain does not go straight up higher than 10 or higher than 4. It does not go higher than 4 because I have an overdrive before the amp that's
Right.
pushing the signal a little bit. And for gent, you want that really staccato feel. Anything higher than like 4, depending on the amp you're using, but on a high gain amp, more than 4, maybe 5 on gain is just overkill. It gets too woofy at you,
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Do you when you're recording something in that genre, or in your general
Yeah.
stuff that you do a lot of, multi-tracking, that like, do you double track all your rhythm
Every
parts?
rhythm guitar is double tracked, sometimes quad tracked. I'll do sometimes quad track. Dude, when I'm doing a technical
so
part and
proud.
I'm doing a 13/8 polyrhythm, I'm like, give me a break. I have to track this 4 times.
Maybe I can just get away with 2.
Maybe I can get away with 2. And dude, the amount of times I'm like, screw it, we're doing 2. I can't, as so many, but
there's a good
every
example
rhythm
of a
track's doubled.
situation where if you were paying for studio time,
Yeah.
Oh
it
yeah,
would
that would
be
cost you.
you're on the clock. So not only is there pressure, but you run out of
And
time.
back then, only 16 tracks. You know how much it cost me to make 8,000 tracks? 0.
Yeah.
But I
can
also
have as
want
many
you to
tracks
talk,
as I want.
we talked about your gent tone, but I think where
Mhm.
you really get the bang for your buck from a technology perspective is with some of your other, like, I want to say shoegaze, because
Yeah.
shoegaze is, in many ways, that guitar is dripping with effects.
Oh,
And
so many.
if Wes and I had to duplicate a shoegaze tone with our gear, it would be, the pedal board would be the size of my bedroom.
Yeah.
And we'd have multiple delays and multiple reverbs and multiple modulations, and you'd be tap dancing. But you get these tones and you're able to get them digitally.
Yeah.
And then you're able to save the entire stack as
I'll
a
save it as a
preset in
preset.
Logic, and you can recall it at any
In
time.
fact, I'll save a whole song file as a template and use that. But
Right.
that's a good point you were making about how big that pedal board would be. I don't know. I know, Wes, you know a little bit about shoegaze. I don't know if you know like the history that much, but the term shoegaze comes from how they had a million pedals
Yeah.
on the ground. So live, they were staring at their shoes the whole time, gazing at their shoes because they need to operate 6,000 pedals.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's funny that what you call history, I call 1986.
yeah. I don't mean to offend.
No, but you're exactly right.
In the olden times,
I was that guy back then when I was trying to find my sound that had a pedal board, and eventually I got tired of it. And so I kind of, kind of revamped the whole thing. But even and I went digital, and then I just had a MIDI, like a bank switcher, a preset selector. But you know, even that took just as long to program it as it
Yeah.
did for me to find the pedal chain that I wanted in the first place. But yeah, I definitely remember those days of tap dancing. And then yeah, they're like, man, you sound great. You can sing backup, right? I'm like, no, dude, I can't look up from my
No.
pedal board.
Yeah.
If I
And
try to sing, I will actually explode.
and what's really cool about my amp modelers is sometimes with shoegaze, you know, you have a reverb before the amp, sometimes you have it after. You know what I have to do to like reroute a reverb pedal?
Click.
Drag it over. That's
Click
it, man.
drag.
I drag it over and I'm like, now it's after the amp. Drag it over. Now it's before the amp. Same thing with all my, I have unlimited amounts of phasers. I know you guys talked about this on an old ass episode, but I love a fuzz pedal. I love a fuzz pedal so much. I know you guys talked about that, how in
Yeah.
love you are with them. I use that for shoegaze all the time, before the amp, after it, wherever. But I have just this unlimited array of pedals. It's phasers, fuzz, you know, flangers, delays, reverbs, anything I want, man.
So
Yeah.
you talk about all this choice as a positive, and I kind of want
Yeah.
to I want to shift the conversation a little bit, or try to, because we've heard this paralysis of choice come up
Yeah,
before.
for sure.
I've been a victim of it because of the amount of choices we have, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on. We've talked about all the positives of all this technology and all the choice, and I want to know, are there drawbacks to all of this choice and all this technology? And especially, are there drawbacks to the fact that it's available to everyone,
Yes.
including some people who may not necessarily have talent? And as someone yourself who listens to music that was actually produced in the last couple of years, unlike the two of us,
Right.
what's out there in the music world that people are producing on their own, and what's the quality like? I just want to talk about what those drawbacks are, if there's
And
drawbacks.
yeah, there certainly are. There's this new thing since music and technology and recording has become more universal, which is the feeling of finding a great band among all the crap.
Yeah.
Because there's so many artists now, because everybody's recording, that when you find a band that's like, oh my God, this band has like one really sick EP, they have 3 monthly listeners, I gotta, like, you know, show people this, you know, it's such a like finding a diamond in the rough sort of feeling,
Hmm.
you know, and that's more of a new feeling more recently, you know. But
Okay.
one of the drawbacks, I would say, is, well, you do have a lot of people making a lot of music. A lot of it is terrible. Some of it's great. So there's more great music out there than there ever has been. But there's also, you know, more people that maybe need a little bit more time before they put stuff out. But here's the thing: is I'm not going to be like, hey kid, you sound like trash. Take another year or so and then put out an album, because it's like they're doing what they want. It's not my business. They're expressing their passion, and I think that's amazing. If putting that record out makes them feel accomplished and they like it, dude, perfect. Good for you. I don't care. Like, enjoy it, man. But the drawback I face the most often is knowing when a song is done.
Yeah.
I can work on I have been. I'll be totally transparent. Nobody knows about this. I've been working on one song for the past 2 years. It hasn't come out yet. It's still in the works. I will most likely work on this song until my fingers fall off and I eventually succumb to the heat death of the sun.
Yeah.
But so knowing when the song is done, because you can do it forever, is really tough.
Because you have no limits. There's no
You have no limits.
There's
So
no
who is there to tell you,
sands in
hey,
the
it's
hourglass or
done?
financially going. You're right. It's just, you just can continue to mix and mix and mix and re-record. And it's like, when
Yeah.
do you know? Well,
And
so
that's even if you can find a tone to record in the first place.
so
Well,
Because I have a million amps. Which one do I pick? They all
I'm gonna
sound good. What do I do?
I'm gonna let you in on a little secret.
Mhm.
That is not entirely limited to the digital realm. And I tell you, I know this because I have a lick that I came up with in 1993.
Hell yeah.
And I have been trying to work it into a song, sometimes with a hammer.
Yeah.
And I finally,
Mhm.
finally, just this year, 30 years after I came up with it, worked it into a song.
Good for you, man.
And it fits.
Good for you.
You know, and
that sounds amazing.
It's recorded, it's with my producer, it's being mixed. I can no longer, you know, and it just that is feels like such an accomplishment, because like that's a lot of emotional weight to carry around for 30 years, man. Just that knowing that you have this thing, it's 4 fucking bars repeated and harmonized. Sorry, I've 2 F-bombs.
There's our 2 F-bombs.
That's 2, and now we're demonetized.
Now we're
now
well,
now you're only making 3 million this year. Great.
So, Wes.
Yes.
30 years?
Literally 30 years.
How did you know it was done this time?
Because it worked. Like
as soon as the feeling, right?
Yeah, as soon as because I had it's the solo in a song, and it hit me that the chord progression that I had come up with for that section, even though I didn't have a melody in mind when I came up with it, because the chord progression fit the rest of the song while it also stood out as being a separate section. And I was like, oh, this is the thing that I did with this is what the thing that I always play the thing over. And so I farted around with it till I got it in the same key, because I originally didn't write it in that key. And I was like, can it work? Can it work? And I did the whole rest of the song. And then I sat down and I threw that thing down over that chord progression, and it just clicked. Like, for the first time since I came up with it, it sounded like it fit, and it fit perfectly, and it just worked. I had to stop and go back and re-record the entire bass track because of just because of this one solo, you know, because once it clicked, everything fell into place.
So that sounds like torture.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to say it wasn't, but it sure was. I slept really well that night. I ain't going to lie to you.
Well done. So, Marshall, how do you know when a song is done? I mean, you could try reference tracks.
Yeah.
Or you could wait 30 years. But I mean, at some point, when do you say this is what it is? How do you, with all the choice available, how do you know when a song is
I'm
done?
a lot better at this now than I used to be, because I know the sort of quality, because I've put out more songs and because I've finished more songs. I know I use my own stuff as a reference.
Yeah.
I say, if it sounds a little bit better than the last thing I put out, it's done. That's my reference point.
That's a good reference point. Yeah.
As long as it's a steady improvement and I'm basing it off of something that's concrete and finished already, then I know that I can continue and be done with that and move on to something else.
So you mentioned some drawbacks are you have to have some discipline in your own material. Otherwise, you could potentially draw out the process.
Yeah.
And the other one is, it sounds like finding good music is harder now because there's more to sift through. Sound accurate?
It's harder and easier. It's a weird duality between this, like, wow, I found this band on YouTube. They have 3 subscribers, and oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever heard that has ever graced my ears before. And then you click on like a recommended next to that, and you're like, oh my God, this person has even less subscribers. This sounds amazing. I need to show all my friends this. Nobody knows about this band. I'm like their first a listener, you know?
So how does someone who was born after 9/11 find new music? Because Wes and Wes and I used to find new music by going into the record store and finding the coolest album cover.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Literally flipping through.
That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed, the visual element of it.
Cover art still matters.
Cover art matters, man. Cover art is what is the most like, here, look at my art, whatever that is the most that stands out to you, that's, I'm like, I'll check it out. So, but the way I go about it is, you know, say, Apple Music, for instance, or, we'll do Spotify because more people have Spotify. You're on an artist, you're looking at their albums, you're playing songs, whatever. You scroll down, at least it's down on like Apple Music, I don't know what. You scroll down and you see like similar artists, recommended artists, you got their name and like their like profile picture of them. That's where you find new music because you're like, okay, they're in a similar genre to this. It's a similar genre, you know. So if you're in the mood for like you're listening to like some, periphery, right? You scroll down, you see, oh, let's see, recommended bands, Polyphia, Animals as Leaders, Intervals. You know that they're gonna sound kind of, sort of, maybe similar, and then you check them out. You don't like it? Okay, well, you didn't pay for it, so you can just go back and look at the next one.
Yeah.
So when you scroll down to similar artists, question for you, and Wes can probably relate to this. If you see a picture of a band and it's 4 guys with long hair and leather jackets standing against a brick wall.
Yeah, not happening. Sorry, bud.
I'm not clicking on that.
Sorry. If you look like your name's Kyle or Dale and you have long hair, you got long hair. If you're wearing cargo shorts, there's no chance. I'm sorry. It's not happening. If it looks like it was taken on a blueberry or blackberry, it's not.
Not
I
happening.
can't do it. If it's got a graphic on it of like a naked lady that's like looking up like this, like, and it's all like washed out and like overexposed, it's I can't do it.
That's a hard
I can't
pass.
do it.
Hard pass.
Yeah, anything with a brick wall, flames shooting,
Yeah,
railroad tracks.
Yeah. The railroad tracks.
Railroad tracks, right? Stairs, a staircase, especially if it's metal.
Yeah, and they're looking up and they're like,
all of that stuff. And if everybody in the band is looking in a different direction,
like they're lost,
or if they're all looking directly at you, I'm like, this feels like I walked into like the wrong bathroom or something. I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm not where I'm supposed to be.
So I want to
sorry, that one just
I
really
just listed 8,000 bands.
Walked into the wrong bathroom. It's probably going to be in my head for a while.
Yeah, and I don't really stream music. So I still buy CDs. I don't know if you can't really see it from here, but I got a turntable. I still buy vinyl, which I know is making a comeback. So I'm finally trendy again, which is really nice.
So trendy.
But I have a friend. I have a friend
Good for you.
who lives in Arizona, and every now and then he sends me a text message and says, "Hey, you ought to check out this band." And because I respect him and his musical choices, because not only did we play in a band together, but we really bonded over Iron Maiden. If he sends me a band, I listen to him.
Yeah.
And that's how I discovered Ghost, Mastodon, and Gojira.
Yeah.
All 3 bands, all of whom I like a lot.
Well, I'm sorry about Ghost, but the other 2 sound cool.
Ghost is fun.
Ghost is fun. They're okay.
I have a friend like that, only he's my son, and he introduced me to Avatar.
Love Avatar.
They were pretty good. You sent me that. Yeah, that was pretty good stuff.
But to be fair, that's payback for what I introduced him to, which was Slipknot and Periphery. So
which was a lot of things more than that. I mean, I have a whole Apple Music playlist that's like only bands that you've shown me.
So Wes,
Avatar is basically Ghost without the fake Pope.
How dare you? If you didn't use that second F-bomb. Oh man. Avatar is what Ghost like prays to at night. It's like, please one day. Like they are so technically we have to do another we doing music that matters with Avatar, please.
Okay. So Wes, you mentioned something that's coming back, which is turntables. But We've been talking about some genres that are making comebacks, and it's weird that in 2023 we've been talking about shoegaze, but not
Yeah.
only have we been talking about it, but it's getting huge again, to the point where guitar tech manufacturers are putting out gear specifically for the shoegaze market. And
Yeah.
I'm not just
Yeah.
talking about the Shields blender, which by the way is probably the like quintessential shoegaze pedal,
Well,
My
and
Bloody
not
Valentine. But
yeah, and
fuzz
not only
pedals are
that,
making a massive
fuzz
comeback.
pedals are huge. The Shields, they did that as a limited run special edition. I think they made like 500 of them. They sold out of them so fast
Mm-hmm.
that they turned around. I guess they probably offshored the production and they put it into production. Like now you can just go buy one anytime from Sweetwater or Guitar
Yeah.
Center.
Yeah. So
And
Wes,
when
the
when you talk about shoegaze, there is nobody taller in that genre than Kevin Shields.
Oh,
And
he's the
homie,
Godfather.
he's still alive
Yes.
and
and
he's
his
still making music,
and his stuff's
you
coming
know?
Yeah.
back, and I can't believe that we're seeing this massive resurgence of shoegaze right now. And I don't even know how, like, because I don't listen to like more, I have to admit, I don't listen to newer music. I wasn't really aware that shoegaze wasn't popular at one point. I just didn't see a lot of new bands doing it, but I don't see a lot of new bands,
Mhm.
period. So now I'm hearing, so Marshall, this is what I want to talk to you about is
Yeah,
you're a music listener. You
I
discovered
am.
shoegaze, but you're discovering new shoegaze, not like just the old stuff. There's this new stuff to,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know, of course, everybody knows My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah.
Most people know
The
Lush.
pioneers.
Yeah, there's
I
Slow
think,
Dive,
yeah, more
Kitchens of
pioneers.
Distinct Kitchens of Distinction, Swerve Driver. I think my memory's tapped at that point. I know
Yeah,
there's more, but I can't think of any more.
sure.
how
But
did
those are
this
all the
resurgence happen?
originators.
Like, how did this happen? Like,
So, to my knowledge, which I'm not a music historian, but this is all like observational. Um, I'm not saying this is exactly what started, but I was seeing My Bloody Valentine put out a self-titled album in 2013,
Yeah,
which their last music they put out was in 1991.
isn't that
Okay.
something?
out of
wow.
out of nowhere. I'm like, what? Oh my god, what? And they released a song called it was on the album She Found Now, which blew up on social media for a bit, and then kind of again faded into obscurity. They haven't released anything since. It's 2013,
Wow.
right? So
Kevin Shields is
okay,
kind of a recluse.
oh yeah, he's like the like the mad scientist,
Yeah.
And then I was seeing Slow Dive put out their self-titled, which again out of nowhere, another like self-titled album. In 2017, their last album was 1995. Their last EP was 2007. So 10-year gap between the
Who do
last
they think
EP.
they are? The Rolling Stones?
And tell you what, man, people loved that album. Loved that album. Came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So that was the first time I was like, oh, okay, this is coming back. This is new. And that was my first exposure to it. My first thing I ever like exposure to shoegaze was My Bloody Valentine off of I forget which album it is. It's the pink one that everybody knows. It has
Loveless.
yeah, Loveless, that's it. I love that album, dude. It's so
I listened
good.
to it today.
It's amazing. And I covered a song from it, because I was so into it. That's what I do when I find new music that I really like is I cover a song from them. So that was my like, okay, this is shoegaze. This is cool. I like this. Then it was like, again, Apple Music, scroll down, recommended. I see Deftones. I'm like, whoa, I've heard of Deftones.
Not a shoegaze
Not,
band.
but I listened and I'm like, this sounds like you took metal and shoegaze and put them together to me. Lots of reverb and ambient stuff, lots of big like the vocals is what got me to that lo-fi vocal where it's like
Yeah.
oh like drawn out, lots
He
of
sounds
like
so sad.
yeah. that sort of melancholic, sort of like so much distortion, but also like sad boy music, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, okay, I like this. I like metal. I like shoegaze. Hell yeah. Like
What
death
is
metal
it
is
about
cool.
shoegaze that's making like that it's getting, is it because the world is just a tire fire right now and everyone just feels
Maybe.
sad? Is that why
Well,
shoegaze is
also
going?
because shoegaze is kind of like lo-fi sounding, and a lot of more current, people are recording stuff actually at home with not a very good equipment.
Yeah.
So that sort of lo-fi sound, that's all they can do. They're putting out shoegaze a lot of the
Yeah.
time.
So talk a little bit about that lo-fi thing, because I don't want to derail the conversation, but you and I have talked a lot about lo-fi because
Yeah.
like I discovered lo-fi the way that most boomers do, through Lo-Fi Girl. And I also know that in the technology world, um, there's been a push to undigitize music,
Yeah.
right? So for a minute, after digital recording got huge, people realized this is all sounding very sterile,
Yeah.
and we need to add
Polished.
some saturation back. We need to add some ick back because it
Yeah.
sounds too good. And so now, like, you can hear that because the modeling, the digital modeling is getting better. So it's starting to sound like you're hearing more of the imperfection in
Yeah.
like digital guitar
Yeah.
tones.
Yeah.
But now there's plugins specifically, and like synth tones and like wavetable granular synth, that everything's sounding gross now, but in a
Yeah.
good way. So
Yeah.
how is this like affecting newer music now that like
So,
we're going for this?
I mean, I would classify myself the only as a shoegaze artist, to be honest with you. The only music I have, and I'm not going to say what it's under because I don't want my face associated with my music. I don't want all that. But like the only stuff I've put out has been one shoegaze song. So I would classify what I put out as shoegaze music. I can tell you, no pedals. But
Yeah,
people
I
are
was gonna
going
say,
back to
how can you
tube amps.
technically call it shoegaze when you're not looking
I don't
at pedals?
screen gaze, I guess you would call it now instead. I don't know, but I don't know, blue light gaze. So, um, you see shoegazers right now going back to the pedals, the big caps, the big amps. The putting a microphone in their bathroom and recording the reverb sound from that and putting it in tracks. And I'm like, cool, that's super cool. I love it. I'm just gonna be on my comfy chair in my and work at my Mac. But
Yep.
I still get that lo-fi sound because amazingly, because that is coming back so heavily, there are plugins, and I have them that make your stuff sound lo-fi. There's
Yeah.
a plugin that I use religiously called Isotope Vinyl. It's on like almost all of my like definitely like shoegaze stuff. It is like a vinyl emulator. I usually put it on like certain tracks. You can really overuse it,
Uh-huh.
but
Mhm.
you can do it by decade. You can be like, I want this to sound like it's on vinyl from 50,
No
1960,
kidding.
1970, etc. Yeah, and you get that tape warble. It's a slider. How much of it you want? That tape warble where it's like out of tune. You
Yeah.
can change like how like degraded it feels. I use it all
Yeah.
the time.
Wes, there's because we're talking about vinyl, we're talking about saturation and adding like some of that analog
Yeah.
sound back in. Universal Audio has plugins that emulate the sound of literal tape machines, like
Mhm.
the Amprex tape machine, like the
Yeah.
actual tape machines. So you can put this plugin on, and it just adds this weird underlying subtle layer of saturation that you would get if you were hitting the tape hard.
Yeah.
And you can change the speed of the tape and like all these
Yeah.
settings. And if you run them through, like, if you there's a plugin you can use for analysis, and you can watch the sound, the wave of the music. Like if you run a sine wave through it, you can see it's having an effect, a very subtle effect, but it's an audible, tangible effect, just to get some like analog back into your stuff. So it's pretty crazy what you can do right now in the
Yeah.
digital realm.
There's
Yeah.
another one I use that is Universal Audio. It's the Studer A800, which is
Oh
like a
man.
yeah.
I used to dream about getting a Studer 8-track.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's about $50. It's about $50. Sounds
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. The
I
one
use
that
it
I
all the time.
wanted was thousands of dollars, and you
Right.
had to have not just a room to put it in, but you had to have a tape op to run the damn thing.
It
Yeah.
was an 8-track.
An 8-track,
Yeah.
little 8-track, reel to reel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see, and that is $30.
So
That's so awesome. And
Or
yet,
I mean, there's different versions of it.
yeah.
This one's 50. The real
Yeah.
one, hey, $12,000. So which one you picking?
yeah, absolutely.
Are there any other genres that are making a comeback other than shoegaze or on top of shoegaze?
Yes, but I do want to talk first the new wave shoegaze stuff, because we talked about old shoegaze bands coming back, but in light of the Deftones stuff, people were then inspired by them and
Mhm.
adopted their sort of metal shoegaze sound. The biggest one would be Loathe, right? They put out their like breakthrough album in 2020. I Let It In and It Took Everything. And there was a song, Is It Really You? That's their biggest song, I believe, right now. Super shoegazy, lots of like long drawn out reverb tails and stuff all over that record, but on that song too, melancholic vocals. There was an artist called Paranol. To See the Next Part of the Dream was the album. Came out in 2021. That's like a return to more traditional shoegaze, I think,
Mhm.
where it's just like drenched in saturation and distortion and reverb. So those two artists right now are like my favorite two shoegaze artists.
If you're
And
talking like modern stuff.
yeah,
Well,
and I think that's really cool.
according to a website called Stereo Gum, the world, and I'm quoting here, the world capital for this new wave of bands, meaning shoegaze bands, is Philadelphia, which I believe is not too far from where you are.
That's
Not
where
too
I'm
far.
born and
That's
raised,
where
my
we're
friend.
from.
Tell me if you've heard of these bands that they say are influencing the new wave of shoegaze.
Yeah.
Tagabo,
No,
Knife Play,
I have heard of them.
Full Body 2,
Nope.
Hotline TNT,
No.
A Country Western, great
Nope.
band name.
Yeah.
Blue Smiley,
I've heard that.
Spirit of the Beehive.
Heard that.
Let's see. Oh, and then they say Duster is not from Philadelphia.
I do like Duster though.
Yeah. Feeble Little Horse
Nope.
is a
That's
Pittsburgh
fantastic.
band. They say is co-opting the Philly sound.
Okay.
So yeah, so at least some of these new wave bands, new wave of shoegaze bands are ones that have made it through your radar.
So we're no longer just known for throwing batteries at Santa Claus.
And burning the city after a championship game.
Right. We're also now known for bringing back shoegaze. Well, damn it, Philadelphia, way to go.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of interesting that you came to the Deftones through the shoegaze angle.
Right.
I
Yeah.
came to the Deftones because I bought a 7-string guitar. I birthdayed
Yeah.
myself a 7-string guitar several years ago, and I wanted to listen to some bands that were like heavily using 7-string guitars. And the first suggestion I got was Deftones. I listened to a couple songs, bought a couple albums. Like they're all over the 7-string.
Mhm.
And how disappointed were you when you found out their two biggest songs were on a 6-string?
Oh, I didn't know that. I got White Pony, I think is the name of the album.
Yeah.
And the one that's right after that, because I figured they would sound somewhat similar.
Yeah.
And both great albums, tons of 7-string. I was perfectly happy with it. And I never really made the shoegaze connection until just now. And like, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Right. I think because they were inspired by like the real traditional old school shoegaze bands, but also the sort of new metal that was coming out around that time, and just we're like, hey, screw it, do both, and it sounds awesome. So yeah, that's like it'd be on the route, especially for Paranol. Anybody who's listening, super underground artist, has like 1 maybe 2 albums out. Please go listen to his stuff. He's really cool.
So I was going to lead you into this because, you know, in the show prep for this episode, we talked about some of the things that are coming back. And I definitely want to start talking about this one because I'm so happy to see this happening in music right now. But it, there's the return of the guitar solo
Mhm.
and the absolute phenoms on guitar right now. So a few years ago, I had just more like 10 years ago, I discovered Guthrie Govan, and I thought I would never
Yeah.
see a guitar player as good as Guthrie Govan. And then I saw Tim Henson play a couple years ago, and I decided I will never play guitar again.
Yeah, amen.
Um,
Yeah, that dude is
what is happening in the guitar world that there are these dudes that absolutely smoke, and their technical proficiency is,
the
and they're not
ceiling
even
has
just
been
picking.
raised.
It's like
Oh
they're
yeah, the finger
using
picking,
their
thumping.
finger picking, thumb picking,
Yeah.
and doing it on like clean tones as opposed to like drenching it with distortion so you can't hear any dynamics. Like they're
You
going the
can't hide.
other way,
Hmm.
super compressed, super clean. It is just like another world out there. Where did this come from?
Well, that became on my radar as soon as I heard Polyphia, which is Tim Henson's band, this album, New Levels, New Devils. Their breakout song was called Goat. No distortion. Um, Hip hop inspired, first of all, and that R and
Yes.
B sound.
Yep.
Cleanest guitar tone you can get, but so heavily compressed that every little movement on this guitar you hear. The
Hmm.
the level of technical ability, the skill ceiling has been raised exponentially because of people like that
Mm.
that are just like, hey, I'm not hiding behind any distortion or reverb or delay. Everything that I'm doing, you're hearing. There's no BS with it, except a crap ton of editing, but we don't have to talk about that.
Shh,
But
let it go.
live, they play it, man. Like
Yep.
Yeah.
this isn't some BS one note at a time recording, pausing thing. Like they play this stuff, and to, I was looking at, interviews and stuff like that with bands like this, and we'll take Polyphia example. They were inspired by bands like Dream Theater, actually, we mentioned, that sort of virtuosic style.
Yeah.
You listen to Dream Theater, obviously, prog rock, prog metal, whatever you want to call it, but there's some beautiful clean stuff and acoustic stuff, real jazzy stuff in
Oh
some
yeah.
Dream Theater stuff, inspired by people like that. Polyphia, actually, I think it's funny. Their inspiration was a lot of death metal originally, which is really technical with the right hand stuff. I really like doing the right hand stuff because I do a lot of trem picking and stuff. But they started off as like tech death, and then moved on to like this out of nowhere, but inspired by those virtuosic players like Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, John Petrucci, and kind of took that, and then
Definitely
they got
on
on
a new level,
fires.
though. I mean, look, I grew up listening to Steve Vai, and I love his stuff, but there's things that Tim Henson does on the guitar that Steve Vai
Yeah,
just can only laugh at.
And just want to take a minute here for anybody that's listening that is a Polyphia fan and recognize Scott LePage,
oh,
because he's
unsung hero.
yeah, I think he's every bit as talented as
Mhm.
Tim Henson,
Yeah,
and LePage is the one playing the harmonies, right? Backwards and in heels. He's got the hard part.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I just want to give Scott some props. If this ever gets
yes,
back to him, I want him to
but
know that he is 100% appreciated
He's
as well.
probably
yes,
less of a presence on the social media, so he doesn't get all of the
yeah.
love that Tim gets, but
Yeah.
he is just as good. Yeah.
Scott looks less like an anime character, which is why people don't know him as much, because
Well, and
Scott,
he might just be a more chill person that doesn't really
he
like to
comes
step
off that
forward
way
into
to
the
me.
spotlight.
Having never met the guy, I can say with full confidence that that is correct.
Yeah. We do that all the time to speak
Yeah.
for these people. But I want to mention something real quick before we move on. There's an event that happens, I don't know if it's every year or if it's every few years. It's called Vi Academy, and it's this
Mhm.
big weekend long education jam session that Steve Vai puts on. And I saw a video where he was kind of introducing and talking about it. And of course, the marketing is there. Buy your tickets now. Come join us in Orlando or Cleveland or wherever the hell it's being held. But he listed off all of the clinicians that are going to be there. And I swear to you, Andrew, hand to string deity, I recognized 3 names, and he listed off like 20 people.
Yeah.
And it was Henson LePage and Jordan Rudess, who is apparently not satisfied with being the most amazing keyboard player on the earth,
Yeah.
and now has decided to play guitar.
And he's a wicked guitar player.
That guy is a wizard. He's an alien. I don't know what levels of drugs he's on, but like he needs to like calm down. Like I was talking about this,
he's
he
taking that clarity pill that
that
was in that one movie. What was the name of that movie? Oh man, that's gonna bother me. The one that made.
Well, I think he took the blue pill and woke up.
Yeah,
I think that's what I think. I think he woke up and one day was like, "Hey, I can beat John Petrucci."
He is very good. Some
good,
videos
man.
floating around of him playing guitar on Instagram, and I thought, is that edited? Because if not, that just makes me very angry that he's that.
Yeah, his secondary instrument is better than I'll ever be. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Like I think he's hiding a 6th finger.
Yeah. So there's the emergence of the guitar gods in the form of these young, technically proficient, but also very harmonically inspiring guitar players like Tim Henson. And I'll even throw Mateus Asado in there because there's another guy I listen to. And while he's got that same level of virtuosity, he's probably more approachable in style. He's got that bluesy neo soul sound that, that edge of breakup tone that I really love. And it's just nice to hear guitar players matter.
He has a neural plugin.
Yes, he does. A
good one.
It's really good.
It's just nice to hear guitar matter again in music,
Yeah. Definitely more guitar centric music coming out recently. Mateus Asado, honestly, if you're not listening to him, you're doing yourself a disservice. He is really fantastic. But another genre coming back that we have, grunge, we have listed here.
Yeah, I got my flannel on.
Did it ever really?
We got.
Did it ever really go away?
It went away for, I would say, in like 2006 to like 2012 sort of era, because that was a lot of the radio rock era.
Yeah.
In my opinion, at least. But that, like we were saying, that more lo-fi sounding recording techniques, what's like the kingpin of that style is grunge,
Yeah.
Screw all your like 80s hair metal, super polished, your really professional sounding recording. We're just gonna be in a garage. We're gonna have our tracks. We're gonna play it. It's gonna sound like ass, but man, if it doesn't sound cool,
Yeah. And when I think of that kind of style of recording, I think of a band called The Killers.
Yeah.
Who are I think a really good example of both that aesthetic and also being good songwriters.
They did start off that way. They got more poppy as they went on, for sure. But their first.
You mean they sold out?
Yeah, I don't like saying they sold out because sold out just means that they can pay for food and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, we'll say they sold out, which means they have more than 20 monthly listeners. And yeah, they're a great band, man. But there's that the Nirvana got big again out of nowhere.
As they should.
People wearing Nirvana shirts.
Fantastic band.
If you say so, bud. I hate Nirvana so much. I'm not gonna lie. People hate it.
That's all right.
People hate me for it. I don't like Nirvana,
the grunge band I hate, Pearl Jam.
I'm with you there.
Yeah, and I think their first album is amazing, and I still hate them.
Grunge band we all love, Soundgarden.
Yeah,
Soundgarden. How do we feel about Stone Temple Pilots?
Yeah,
you fools.
From a guitar standpoint, there's a lot to love in there. The bass playing was
standpoint
awesome. Yeah, the bass player it was and is just an imaginative. And believe it or not, the guy he reminded me of when they first came out was the bass player in REO Speedwagon.
Are-
I'm
really?
I'm dead serious. If
That's a cool
you
band.
well, and like they're the kings of AOR in the
I was going to
70s and
say the bass
80s.
player in Supertramp.
But yeah,
Also,
the guy that played the studio bass player for ABBA was a monster. But those are not bass forward mixes, so it's really
Right.
easy to miss the bass. So one thing that Stone Temple Pilots did that a lot of other grunge bands didn't do is their mixes were very bass forward, because
Yeah.
that was a big part of their overall sound, was the guitar and the bass playing against each other
Yeah, because
sometimes.
they were doing more than just, eighth notes on the root note,
Yeah,
I-
yeah.
And
you know,
that was the bass player that got me into playing bass. My main instrument is a guitar, but I have a bass back there that I love playing along to Stone Temple Pilots
another
songs.
thing I like about Stone Temple Pilots, I know we didn't give him a lot of love when you mentioned it, but what I like about Dean as a guitar player is he adopted, in my opinion, the Jimmy Page style of recording, which isn't like quadruple track guitars everywhere and I own the soundscape. He was like, I'll take a little combo, stick it here, put a mic on it, and I want to occupy this little bit of space.
Yeah,
But he
Yeah.
does it in such a way that like the guitar part just demands attention, and he leaves
Yeah.
all that room for everything else.
so
And it's
much
just
headroom.
yeah, yeah, really cool.
That's another thing. Not too much distortion.
Yeah. Alice in Chains, there's another good grunge band that never
Love
went
Alice
away.
in Chains.
See,
Although
now
they don't quite get the attention they used to. I mean, their singer died and they got a new singer.
Well, because their
But
last album, I'm gonna be real, was not super. It wasn't Alice in
and
Chains.
I
I
didn't even hear it. So
I don't know that I would call Alice in Chains grunge though. See, I think they were
What?
from Seattle and they were at the time, but I'm telling you, I think they were like almost like a leftover hair metal band that just started getting a little heavier.
yeah, I'll allow it.
You like you know what I'm saying, right, Wes? Like
If
it
you're
just
I
not
do.
gonna say
he was Jerry Cantrell was too good to be grunge. Like he was
Well, I don't really consider Soundgarden a true grunge band. I think the grunge
Mm.
bands were, especially the ones from Seattle, were all trying really hard to be Soundgarden.
oh guys, you know what we're doing?
gatekeeping.
We're gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Oh, it's full circle. Now we
Well,
suck.
but the cool thing is so they were all trying really hard to be Soundgarden, and they created their own genre, and it encompassed all of these other bands from the area, which might have been a disservice to some of them. I know, I'm trying to think of, like, the Meat Puppets were often called a grunge band, and I think they were really more of just a
Yup.
weird ass rock
Like
band,
alt rock, yep, absolutely.
but
Mhm.
that's okay. I think as humans we have a tendency to classify things to make us more comfortable with them.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, all
but
right.
yeah,
agree with
it
that.
doesn't break my heart to hear grunge making a comeback. I'm really pleased with that.
No, I
I'll
think
tell
there's
you
a
the
lot of good
biggest
bands.
comeback that I never anticipated,
Mhm.
never saw coming, and am still stunned by:
Taylor Swift.
Andre 3000's Flute album.
Yes.
Andre-
Andre
80
3000.
88 minutes of freeform new age jam flute music, completely unapologetic. He
Who
threw
in
it
the
out
hell is
and
Andre
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 3000 was
3000,
half
American rapper
of,
and singer.
yeah, he was half of one of the best hip hop bands of all time, Outkast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he was to me he always seemed like he was the one that was having a whole lot of fun. Not that the other guy wasn't having fun.
That is a big ass flute, dog. I'm looking at pictures. What the
That's
hell
not
is
a-
happening?
That's a brand new sentence. I'm sorry, but that's not a sentence anyone has ever spoken before.
Yeah. But I'm so impressed. Now I listened to some of the songs off of it. I
Yeah.
don't like it at all. I'm not going to listen to it again. I'm not going to buy the album. But the balls on this guy to come out with an album that is so different from anything he's ever done, and completely like, he hasn't been touring for the last 10 years as a jazz flautist, excuse me. You know, like he dropped this album like a hot rock into the fabric of humanity and is just watching it burn through our society. And I'm just so pleased that he said, like, this, look, this is the music I do now. Buy the album or don't. This is what's happening.
That's cool, man.
You
Talk
know?
about music that matters. The Andre 3000 flute album.
Yeah, can we get the flute album from Andre 3000 on Music That Matters, please?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And what's it called? It's called Blue something.
Oh,
New Blue Sun.
That's dope.
88 minutes of freeform.
88 minutes.
88 minutes of freeform new age jazz.
Is it a concept album?
That's
nope.
That is intentional. Like if you don't make an 88-minute record without going, I'm making an 88-minute record. Like,
yeah. And I mean, I'm kind of impressed at that. Dude, I struggled to put together 21 minutes.
How many notes are there on the flute?
All of them.
Yeah.
All right, I think we've hammered those things pretty solidly. Do either one of you guys have any last words before we wrap up and put together the next Music That Matters episode?
Neural DSP, please sponsor us. I would love to get a free plugin out of this if you guys don't mind.
Archetype Akahoshi sounds good. I want to thank you, Wes, as always, but I also want to make sure I thank my son for being a great guest, honestly, and putting yourself out there and, you know, accepting the invitation and being part of what I think was a really interesting and educational, at least for me, conversation. So thank you. I think you did a phenomenal job. Definitely will serve you dinner tonight for sure. You'll get dinner.
You earned your dinner.
Thank you. It's been so long.
And thanks for taking it easy on me, because you know, this was just a really fun experience. I really enjoyed it, and I thought, and again, I really don't want to hammer it home, but you taught me some things tonight about music and some other things. It's gave me some perspective, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I absolutely. I gotta echo everything that he said, except for the dinner thing, because I can't really help you out there. I really, you know, there you go. Well, there's another generation gap. I don't use them. I am aware of them. I just don't use them. I really appreciate, you know, getting a little taste of your expertise, because as I get a little bit older, I'm looking down the road knowing I'm not always going to have a house that enables me to put the amp in the other room.
Yeah.
You know, and it used to be I could only record when my daughter was away because I put the amp in her room. You know, she's moved out, so I have freer access to that room, which is really nice. But the cat always gives me a dirty look when I bring an amp in there, because I think he thinks it's his room.
Oh, not again, please.
So, you know, I know that down the road, I'm going to need to move to an in the computer solution, and I'm a lot less nervous about that after having a nice in-depth talk with you. Yeah. I am a little disappointed, though, that gatekeeping in guitar has not only, you know, remained pervasive, but is now being perpetrated by some of the biggest names in the business, and that just kind of breaks my heart.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll find a way to put a stop to that.
Yes, it starts now. This is the protest.
The healing must begin.
Yeah, and you know what? One last thing for, you know, Steve Stevens, Steve Lukather, and
Uli Roth.
Uli Roth. One last thing for y'all. Stop bitching and put out some music. You know, remember why you got into music, because you loved it. You know, it doesn't have to be. Stop. Just stop. You have so much money. Why are you angry?
I thought you were going to say cope harder.
Cry more, cope harder. Put out some music, you know, and then talk about how much everybody sucks, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that perspective. And I really appreciate you guys both for being here on Different Strings, a guitar adjacent podcast. And don't forget, as Andrew says, the name of the website one more time.
differentstringspodcast.com, if you please.
We are here and there for you. You can comment, you can like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. But we really want your questions, because that's where we get some ideas for the next several episodes. And of course, we'd love to engage with you. So check us out online, and we'll see you with the next episode. Thanks a lot.
Peace.